session of today. So this is a culmination of a lot of the work our team has done over the last year plus. So at the last summit, if you were there, we announced our new virtual production studio. So this is really the combination of media design and production and extended reality technologies. So you're going to hear from our team at Creative Studios, at Center for Academic Innovation, about the work we've been doing to transform online learning through XR and virtual production storytelling. So I'd like to invite our team to come on up and have a panel discussion presentation. So Chamela is our virtual production producer, Jeff, Ray, Moiso, and Eric unfortunately got sick yesterday, so he's not going to be here, but the team's going to fill in. So the mics are on. They're hot. I don't know who's going to be. So this is the clicker. This seat, it doesn't seem to work too well if you're too far from this seat, so Chamela's going to have to advance all the slides. But looking forward to this conversation, and we'll have time for Q&A at the end, and we'll wrap it up. So thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Che Miller. I work with the Creative Studio at the Center for Academic Innovation. Same with my colleagues, so I'll let them introduce themselves.
I'm Jeff Butler, Media Design and Production Lead at the Center for Academic Innovation. Help manage the media team and support them where they need it.
My name's Ray Majewski. I'm the XR environment artist. So I do all environment blocking, 3D modeling, visuals.
Hi, my name is Moiso Salim. I'm one of the two senior XR developers on the team.
Before we start, I'm going to play a 60 seconds clip of some of the projects we've done over the past 1 year. Is anyone here familiar with the term virtual production or XR production? Excluding CAI members, I think you all already know what virtual production is now. Okay, we would be a bit linear on some of our technical terms, so it's easy for you to understand. So basically, virtual production is a modern filmmaking technique that combines live action and CGI imagery to create a final pixel video in real time. So a final pixel video, for example, when you film on a green screen, you take the video to post production, and then you key out the green screen, and then you apply your virtual set and all of that. So, but with virtual production, all these are happening in real time, and you're getting your final video right there. And so this is one of the benefits of virtual production. If you look at on this slide, that's our studio, and this is XR production. So XR production is also like another technique in virtual production whereby it involves all interactive elements, AR projection, and set extension. So on the image that has the live feed from the studio, you could see the content on the LED wall, and then on the other image is the final composite, which has the set extension over the LED wall. And all that's are happening in real time and projected through game engine softwares like Unreal Engine and Disguise. So basically, Unreal Engine is a popular game engine where we create all 3D and virtual sets. Disguise is the software we use to project the content onto the LED wall. So just a little bit of info about our studio. It's a full broadcast LED and virtual production volume. It's powered by these guys VX4 and RX2 servers. It's also powered by Brompton processors, and we have about 3 Red Komodo cinema cameras. We also use the Red Spy camera tracking system, which is that's what helps to send data feed between the physical world and the digital world, and several other high-end equipments. Um, this is also another image that shows some of the capabilities of our studio. This was a faculty member in her course content. She was talking about her time in Egypt, and she first recorded a video in a regular lecture studio, and then she wanted to have an image of the Nile River in Egypt behind her, and so we're able to recreate the shoot in our XR studio. So you could see some of the benefits the studio allows us to do, using diverse environments and all of that. So in 2024, our studio was launched in the ending of 2023, but we started productions in 2024. And so far, we've had productions like Black Performance as a Social Protest, which is still in the works. We have done real estate development, building value in your community. The course is currently on Coursera. Mindfulness, Dignity, and the Art of Human Connection. That's also been published on Coursera, and several other videos. And so far, we've had over 2,800 learners on the 2 published courses we've done, and they are still growing. So I think at this point, Jeff, I'm gonna start with you. So you've been with us for quite some time, and you guys have been filming with Blackboard Studio and all of that, and then the XR Studio came along. So for you, what's the advantage of using XR Studio in online education content?
Yeah, I think the one thing about education that's a little different than most media work is you have this other purpose of educating. Uh, but the important thing that comes along with the XR studio is you can create a lot of engagement. So when we're doing stuff in the lecture studio, we're not just trying to make things look cool on the XR stage. We're trying to create a piece that can keep the learner moving through the course. It's also just a way for them to be more invested in the content that's being delivered. This could be a major emphasis on the course, and we're selecting virtual production or extended reality to help put an emphasis on that piece. And we're still learning what it does. We're still learning the benefits, and we're still learning how to use it in the most effective way. But that's a great thing about working at an innovation center like CAI is we get to have that freedom to kind of figure out the next step forward for education online, for hybrid education. So for me, I think we don't know the full answer to that. But I know right now we're looking at finding ways to keep learners engaged in the course.
Great. Do you want to add to that?
Yeah, so with Janela's brief description for everyone in the room, basically for our process is scripts get written or something, and the course understanding. Then it comes into really like development stage of storyboarding and visual development as we start to visualize these. And I'm the first person that actually touches the Unreal file. So in the game engine, which is for everyone in the room, there's a lot of 3D models, and the game engine's kind of where all the ingredients go to compose of some plate or dish. And so, like for my process, coming from specifically an architecture background, a lot of the shoots we do visualize real environments, so it's really not quite difficult in terms of like understanding we've got to recreate these spaces. But like Jeff was saying, it's a lot different than media and entertainment. So media and entertainment, sometimes your goal is to do something and make it look really cool, or really try and like be secondary to some of the visual content or speaking. Where with the educational facilitation, our backgrounds have to actually be just as important as the actor or the talent or the educator that are on our stage. And the hardest part of like working through all that is actually just like developing the assets and knowing that you're developing the correct assets, because it's really easy to pretty much model anything or find anything, but it's really like when it comes down to like working with the educator and talking through and understanding visual styles and what would cater really well to some of their topics, and not getting really caught up in giving them anything they want, but really giving them the correct thing that will help sort of like mediate that conversation or facilitation properly. And so like my work specifically starts in like any of the modeling softwares. I pretty much know most of them. So like depending on what I have to model will depend. Like if it's in Blender or Rhino, or if I'm getting source files from someone and I basically compose it. And it's a little different than ArcViz to where you're doing renderings. You're actually working with like humans on the stage, and so that's kind of becomes where the technical part gets a little more interesting for me, is because compositionally we have to adjust the blocking and know how to like stage things, or like does the asset work with scale, like how do we light it, what do materials look like. And so like doing the visuals is yeah, it's a lot of work actually. And so yeah, you can't just like snap your fingers. I wish AI could do that. It kind of can now, but not super well. There still has to be someone to say like critically, yeah, that's not right. And yeah, so it's like really like the educational content Jeff's saying. A lot of our work has just been like being able to situate people in the right context to tell the best.
Okay, just to add to what my colleague said, so I came from a journalism production background, and in the past I do cover conflicts. I go to tough regions where there's conflicts going on and all. I go there to cover stories, and then my family and friends would always ask me, "Why are you going there? Is it worth risking your life to go get the story? Why don't you just stay in the studio and use UGC content from people and just use it as slides?" And the answer is, when as a reporter, when you are in the situation, when you are in the environment, when you're there where it's happening, it feels more engaging for the viewers. And um, and that's the goal for this virtual production studio. We want to be able to bring difficult places, hard to reach areas to the studio, and so the faculty can be able to deliver their lecture in that space. So for example, we have a course, leadership in healthcare, which involves you know a Mountain Everest scenario. And it's going to be very expensive to take the faculty members and the actors and all of that all the way to Mountain Everest. That's going to be extremely expensive, and nobody want to do that. So, but we are able to digitally recreate those environments and then project it on the LED wall, and reducing travel time, reducing production cost, and all of that, and being able to produce this cost content in a controlled environment. And then also with added benefits of creative flexibility, it gives us really filmmaker to be able to, be more creative in creating this content, because we want to create educational contents that are engaging to the learners, and so it gives us that added benefits. I'm going to move over to our workflow. This is one of the popular questions I do get. How do we start and end the project? So basically, we usually start with briefing. That's where we get to understand the faculty's vision, and what they want to accomplish, and if it's a right fit for virtual production or not. And during that process, we also look into, because there are also several techniques in virtual production. There's the virtual production, there's the XR, and there's also the 2.5D workflows, whereby you can use images or AI generated images or videos as well. And so we, at that stage, we determine, okay, this is the process we're going to use, and then we go into the development of the video structure. So that's where we begin to define what the script is, because for virtual production, it's very important to have the script ready before going into development. And from there, we move into the design stage. That's where we begin to develop the digital assets and every other animations that might be created within the project. And then we go into the production stage. So during the production stage, we usually also have like test shoots, because most faculty members are not so familiar with working in LED volume. And then also if it has interactive elements as well. So we use the test shoots to get them to learn about the space and how to present. And then we have the main shoot as well, and then we go into the post production stage. So that's the regular editing, and sometimes if we want to add like extra wide shots, we create that in 3D. So, but this is like the basic workflow we work with. Ray, I'm gonna move to you now. Like, so you play a very major part in this workflow as well. So, like, what's your workflow like when it comes to like developing these assets?
So it's a lot of research. I think that the due diligence of always knowing not just the newest stuff. Like I think there's a comment yesterday about don't just chase the tools, but kind of use the tools that are arising to help you with ideas. It's probably the best tip because everything is changing every day in terms of like computer vision or like how other things are being produced and workflows to expedite. But in addition to doing research on tools or ways or techniques to do any of the tasks, it's really about the visual development and understanding, working with Chimela specifically early on to know, let Chimela do his thing and speak with the faculty and vet out what the script and what the story is that they're trying to tell. Because if we start too early with the visuals, that it's very easy sometimes for the interest in the visuals to try and carry a story versus the story being told properly and allowing the visuals to support that. And so when I come in, it's a lot about hearing what they want and then trying to really navigate timelines or like resources and all the other projects on our like plate at the time. Because like for example with the leadership and healthcare one, it's just starting. So we're really kind of refining this process. Where like behind me you see the screenshot of some of the process from the Black Performances Social Protest. So this is kind of the main context of the project is basically like Michelle was saying, this is sort of like an iteration or a video module that's being added to this project, and working with the director who is also a theorist and trying to like and the theater director. It's really about like where like a dramaturg might come in and tell a story that's like being told within this performance. My job was specifically to help transport the performers to Selma, and it's kind of like not specifically one of the marches of Selma, but it's sort of like a general idea of like this like movement happening at the time. And so we shot specifically like if you're walking from Selma to Montgomery, we shot the other side of Selma from downtown, looking towards it with like downtown in the background. And so like from an environment art standpoint, that was actually like a perfect that was great for me because it was just less work to be honest. And but now we have to do the wide shot, so I'll be doing all of the rest of it. So it just displacement. But so in building and like modeling the bridge, it was really involved just a lot of satellite imagery or reference images and understanding sort of like what did it look like and trying to get the likeness, which that's just kind of a technical job at that point and understanding how to model it. But then like the artistry of knowing how to place certain elements, and where it really comes in is when someone like Chimela and Jeff that are talking about directing and shooting and blocking with the actors, there was like a request at one point for a practical prop. So you can make anything behind you in virtual production, but it still kind of flattens sometimes. And you can get like with recent updates, there's depth of field that's included, but realistically speaking, some of the older shoots there's not really a lot of depth happening in the background. So you can see like in the top middle, there's actually some technical drawings that I produced for kind of like a segment of a column. And so like my job really spans like not only the digital development, but the development of all the practical props. And I worked with a student, Erica Morrissey. I must give her a shout. She's not here, but an absolute unicorn when it comes to like skill sets. And so she comes from a theater, like set design background and architecture and scenic painting. So we were very quickly able to be like, this is the visual we need, the composition of the shot, and realistically, we can build this for under $30. And so we'll like laser cut the pieces and age it. And so we were able to do test blocking like on the set and really understand the camera movements as we like develop that story with the people walking from the bridge and having an outside shot from the bridge. And so it's really like trying to figure out how to combine the physical and the digital is very difficult actually in terms of color matching. But that's sort of a case study of the workflow that I've
Okay, thank you. So Marizo, you're usually the next person, when Ray is done with developing his assets, you're the next line, you and Eric, you take that asset and then add every animations and interaction. So could you share more light about your workflow process?
Absolutely. So the developers get involved in the pre-production stage right after Ray has developed has initial pass of the virtual environment. The storyboard script has been finalized. So we first look at the storyboard and we map out what are the interactive elements that are needed, what are the animations, any digital characters that are needed, and we map those out on scene by scene. And then one of the very important thing is to just take the environment in the initial state and load it up on the stage. And look at the frame rates at which it's running. We are aiming for a frame rate of 60 frames per second or more, or higher. And then initially, like Ray does such a fantastic job of optimization, like it does hit that frame rate. So then we start building out, developing those interactions, and the game engine we're mostly using for this is Unreal Engine. So there can be like a lot of different types of interactions on the stage. Shamila has already mentioned some of those. So there could be like front plate elements, back plate elements. There can be some animations that are aligning with like the content that the faculty is saying on the stage. There could be tracked objects in the digital environment that are controlled by the faculty who's the faculty usually they hold a physical device that they move around and that moves a digital object in the environment. There could also be some interactions or events that need to happen at certain point in real time. So all of these interactions, there can be different ways of triggering them in real time during the production. There we have we can set it a web interface on the iPad and hand it either to the faculty or we could be controlling it for them. And it's an interface of sliders and buttons that we push um, um, according to like the content. And then we also have another way of controlling these interactions could be like exposed variables from Unreal that are exposed to disguise. This media server we use, and then we can control those variables directly in there during production. So basically, all the different types of interactions and then the way of controlling these interactions essentially determines how we're going to script it in Unreal Engine. And then once we've done like our interactions, we schedule test shoots. Depending on the complexity of the project, we can have multiple test shoots. We often do have multiple test shoots, but the faculty don't really need to be there for all of them. For our first test shoot, we again check that the environment is still performing after adding the interactions at an optimal frame rate. We also do a dry run of the script and do all the interactions with the script. And then we are also like, when we load up the environment on stage, oftentimes there's like things we notice like that need to be changed in real time. Like there's like a pillar right behind the faculty that just doesn't look nice and needs to be shifted or something like that. So we do those adjustments in real time. And there's lighting. The virtual lighting needs to be adjusted when it's up on the stage. So those are the things that we're constant. This is like very iterative and collaborative process. So it's not just the developers like Ray, Chimela, Jeff. Everybody is involved in like providing feedback and then making those changes. And it's both online while the content is up on the stage, and then some of the optimization passes that we do offline. After that, yeah, we're ready for the production day, and we hope that the faculty can be on stage like easily just delivering their the lecture content, and we can trigger facilitate them in triggering these interactions. And sometimes we also need to do real-time adjustments right on the day of the production as well. So we're ready with like a multi-user editing session, so we can move some virtual elements around, and then lighting again. On the production day, we have to tweak the virtual lighting just a little bit to match the actual lights on set. So after production, we sometimes for some of our projects we have B-rolls that need to be rendered out. So these are like wide establishing shots. They're completely digitally rendered. For that, again, a collaborative process. We work with the DOP. Oftentimes it's Jeff, Chimela, Ray, and and we compose the scene, the digital scene. We set up the camera angles, and then um, we we have to like experiment with different settings within our game engine to get the renders looking good. And it's always like different depending on exactly what kind of scene it is. If it's an outdoor field scene or an indoor, for example, with Black performance, like a church setting. So it depends. So there's a lot of experimentation involved there as well. And yeah, that's basically the developer's process.
Thank you. So Jeff, you usually start at the beginning and then towards the end you take a break and then come back towards the end of the process, and then it's me and you trying to do the lighting and trying to fix light speeds and all of that. So could you share a bit more about your process as the DP of the shoot?
Yeah, I mean, it really depends on the project, how early we become involved as a media designer. For something like Black Performance for Social Protest, you want to be in there as early as possible so that you can start kind of helping work along and collaborate with the team on establishing a vision and what you really want to do. Because if we're going to shoot something cinematically, like we did with Black Performance, versus something like sorry, I was about to say the acronym, but the real estate course that we just recently did. That's more of a presenter on stage presenting in this case it was a house, and identifying pieces of the house that would say, oh, this is a property you should purchase. When they get up there, that's more of a presenter versus something where I have to emulate an actual set, where I have to emulate sunlight. I have to any lights that might be in the room. We have to fake all of that. So getting in early to understand what the scenes are going to look like, what elements we want to have in there is super important, so that when we get to the filming day and we have our shot list and everyone's there ready to go, we already have the lighting setup kind of locked in for the most part. There's always going to be tinkering, but once we come in, we lock that in. We have our crew. We have a successful shoot, depending on. We haven't had not a successful shoot, but after we're done with production, most of our work honestly comes in post. That's where we spend most of our time on any given project is post. So from there, we start assembling the piece, and then we're going to work back and forth with the faculty member and the team members here to make sure that we have a piece we're all happy with, a piece that flows. When you're close to a project for so long, you get to a point where maybe the edit isn't working like you think it is. But so far, I think we're in a good place with at least Black Performance Social Protest. But yeah, after that, it's really just an iterative process after that.
Thanks. So with every new and exciting technology, there are always, the downside and some of the challenges. Although with some of the challenges we've also experienced, we've also learned how to overcome some of these problems and, become better on how we produce content with the LED wall and all. So Black Performance as a social process was one of the first projects we did after launching our studio. And it was a very big project. It's had over, I think, more than a dozen actors in the space, and we had lots of several scenes from different eras, from the 80s to the 90s and 2020. And this project was like, we were using high fidelity assets in it. So, and also plus, the first time doing a virtual production shoot on our stage, and we were also still learning about our stage, what it could do and what it couldn't do. And so, our director threw us into the hotspot by bringing this video as one of our first projects. So I'll start with you, Jeff. So what are some of the challenges you've experienced, and how have you learned to overcome them?
Yeah, challenges are my favorite part of the job, frankly. When things aren't going well, that's the most fun you can have, because now you're starting to experiment. You're trying to find your way out of a corner that you've painted yourself into, maybe. A lot of times it's self-inflicted, and that's okay. You got to find your way out of it. And I think in this case, we didn't really paint ourselves into a corner, but there's a lot of things that happen in virtual production that make things look completely fake, especially when you're indoors and you're shooting outside a window. If I were to do that, we have a church scene. I don't know if it actually is this the whole thing, or is this just, it is the whole thing. There's going to be a church scene that pops up at some point. And if you look at the windows in the scene, if I were to shoot it in real life, I'd want to see as much as possible outside those windows, right? I want to have the dynamic range to be able to see details outside. Now, that requires a lot of light usually on location. that requires ND on the windows sometimes, which is uh, basically cuts the light so when it comes through you can actually see. So in the church scene, we could have done that perfectly, but to sell it as something real or a real location, we actually blew out the windows a little. I would never do that in real life. I wouldn't say, "Hey, I want to make this terrible in camera." That's not what you want to do. But you want to create these elements that say, "Hey, this is real." Because if we wanted, and it's my problem, it's an opinion, but it's my problem with CGI is everything is too crisp, everything's too perfect, everything is lit perfectly. When in reality, it's the imperfections that we need to see. So one of the challenges for this is I need the blown out highlights sometimes. I need some crushed blacks. I need it to look like we struggled to light it maybe a little bit, but it still has to be something that works. So finding that balance is really tough because we could do a really terrible job if we were like, hey, let's lean into all the bad things you could do possibly on a set. In this case, we said we want to incorporate pieces of this so that we can tell the story right and do a great job. But yeah, the church scene was actually probably the most difficult scene for myself because for most of the shoot, especially in the fields, we had to mimic light. We wanted a harsh sunlight. We didn't want to do that for every shoot because that can be challenging, especially when you have a large group of folks. So we did overcast for most of everything, which kind of flattens the light and allows you to kind of have a nice even exposure. But the church, you had lights everywhere. You're trying to mix lighting. You have sunlight coming through the windows. You have lights on the ceiling. We at one point had lights on the walls. I don't know if we still do. And then at the same time, you don't want it to look so dark in the church that nothing's properly exposed. So that was a challenge, but ultimately I think it turned out. I'm happy with what we did, and I think I'm having a lot of fun creating the imperfections that really on a stage like this, it just makes things look too perfect. It really is almost that uncanny valley that you're trying to get past. So that's a major challenge I was running into. You disappeared. You went over there.
Okay, yeah, where you could contribute to that.
It's all difficult. So, it's just a lot of great people working on it. And so, like, yeah, I mentioned earlier on, didn't really brush on the actual technicalities of 3D modeling, but one of the largest challenges, like for the job in general, but specifically through the case study of this project, is probably the sourcing of your assets and understanding where to dedicate your time to customized development. So some people call them hero assets. Not in my world, but I know that's the term used in the world, so I'll use it. So those are like the really key assets that are in the foreground or being interacted with. Things that need probably the highest fidelity. Probably not fidelity in terms of style, because like you can have like obviously something that's stylized versus something that's hyper real. And so like for this shoot, we really teetered like in the beginning if we were going to do stylized or hyper real, and the implications of that are actually sort of like exponential in terms of work. And so like for this one, it was by kind of picking with the realism. It was actually a little easier to source some assets. Like you can go into like the Epic Marketplace store and get a couple things. Now, if it's optimized or not, sort of like Moise was saying, that's usually the problem. Is like sometimes, usually the Epic stores for mobile for like VR, sometimes some asset packs, so they're pretty optimized. But sometimes people just dump files in there and are like, "Good luck, give me $20," and so you buy it, and it's sometimes like a roulette. You don't know what you're gonna get, and so. But like for example, with I guess to keep with the case study of Selma, like with some kit bashing in the background, it can be done. So kit bashing is kind of maybe derived from like the old days of making models and buying model kits and then kind of combining a bunch of them, like the Millennium Falcon, seeing a lot of parts from like a model car that looks like some weird engines. So you can do that to do like filler within the composition, but like overall, the challenge was trying to get, since we cover 140 years in this virtual production, like yeah, I'll talk about the aerial in a second, but yeah, it's just trying to get the right imperfections. So doing like research on a Baptist church and understanding in Mississippi what kind of construction you have, and having those conversations with like Louise, who we work with. And Louise is telling me the stories of like her family in the Baptist church and understanding sort of like those narratives and those tales that are kind of giving you the understanding like from the South, specifically so I'm in the context and the mindset of them. And so yeah, the optimization is probably the hardest part, just because you want it to run well. You know, like the windows can't flicker. The people have to look like they're moving correctly. Moisa's sort of the master on that. She's really good with animation, so. But yeah, it's just like it's a lot of work on that front. So
Okay, so talking about animations, I think Maisie you could add in on that.
Yeah, okay, yeah. I can start with the animations if you want. Um, so the animation involves like not all of our productions, but some of them, like you see here, involves digital people. And in our case, the digital people were not too far in the back. Like they were pretty close to the real people. So we had to. So there was like a balance of like having digital characters that look real, and also be optimized so that we can still hit that frame rate of 60 frames per second. So there was like a lot of work that went into like setting up, consolidating the materials, making sure the texture sizes weren't too big, um, making sure like there weren't too many materials, so they're not like multiple draw calls for like a single asset. Setting up level of details on these people. And overall, just to keep the frame rate high with that many digital characters, like we had to optimize other things like the balance between static lights and baked lights. Static lights are more performant. So a bunch of optimizations that went into the digital humans. In this specific project, it's because we're talking about different time periods, so they had to be dressed in costumes, like costumes that needed to be period accurate. So there was custom costume creation and then optimizing those assets. The what else goes? Yeah, so the animation mocap, like another team member, like Eric, did the mocap and did the animation cleanups for that. So yeah, all that, a lot of work went into the like, having the meta. These are, so we used Unreal Engine's meta humans that are pretty realistic looking, but not optimized. So a lot of work went into optimization. And then our biggest lesson learned from this was that do not, like, this isn't, that's something that's typically done in virtual production. You don't have digital characters, that close to real people, because like you can tell that they're not going to be perfect. So you typically keep them in the background as crowds, which we've done in some scenes. But for church, they were just very close to real people. So yeah, really think about why do you need the digital characters, and if you do, like how you're going to place them in the environment. And also, if I can talk about a few more challenges, I really yeah. So another challenge is like real. I talked about like a lot of interactions that go on real time. So there's like a lot of like troubleshooting and like fixing in like during the day of production. That's just stressful for me, so I find that challenging. And we're also like always finding out like disguise our media server. We're still figuring out like sometimes it's not our, like we focus so much on our Unreal environment because that's where our expertise lies. And but there can be issues caused by our media server disguise, and we don't have too much expertise in that field. So um, that's another challenging thing. And then one personal challenge that I have is that like I don't have a filming background. I have like a computer science background. So during production, there's like a lot of like talk among the production crew. Like they use terms that I don't always understand. So so yeah, that's also one of the challenges.
I promise.
You're very mindful. Like now, so whenever they're talking to me, they explain all the terms, but it's just among themselves. I just want to know what they're saying. But yeah, it's
like
an added.
to be honest, when we're in the studio.
There's one more challenge I wanted to bring up that kind of relates to cinematography, and I'm surprised I missed it. The other big piece that we had was the simpler shots that you would typically get on the day of shooting are much more challenging on the stage. Like we originally wanted to transition to open the door into the church with a hand hitting the doorknob. That you can't do on the stage unless you bring in a door. You got to source the door. You got to find the time period. That becomes really challenging. We wanted footsteps walking in dirt at some point. That super easy shot on the day when you're on set. Here, impossible. We have an LED floor. The resolution isn't great. So we're not going to be able to use that. Also, dirt's dirt. It moves. So all those little things that you feel like, oh, we'll just get an insert or a pickup or we'll have a pickup day. Well, that pickup day list becomes really long, and pickups are the shots that you get after the fact because we'll cut it for time, we'll get it later. Um, that list becomes very long, and it becomes a whole nother production in itself. So it's that value in, value out. You have to make a lot of decisions on the fly before you go shooting. At every stage, you have to make a lot of decisions where you typically need this to tie a scene together. Now you have to solve, how do we get to the next scene? How do we transition to the next scene? We're solving a lot of that with renders, but really, all the little things that kind of make a film sometimes on the stage is almost impossible. So, yeah, that's a big part.
Yeah, just to add, I know we've been all talking about AI and all of that, so I just wanted to mention that this project, we did most of it from scratch. So AI was really so involved. But however, we also use generative AI for some productions for to the workflows and all. But we're able to create most of these scenes from scratch. I think we are good for some questions now.
Thank you. Thanks for all the hard work, and thanks for sharing your process. So I was the one that gave you this difficult challenge. So this was an idea we had of like, oh, it'd be really cool. We have this stage. We have this course called Black Performances Social Protest. The faculties in the School of Music, Theater, and Dance, they would be more comfortable. We've got media designers. We've got visual artists. We've got game engine developers. Let's just put everybody together and make this happen. It did, but how did that land from where we thought it was when we generated the idea a couple years ago to where we are today?
I want to answer just.
Talk about Winnie the Pooh.
Yeah, I want to talk about Winnie the Pooh. So we have a couple stages here at the university. There was ideas of where it would be shot and how we would do it, and we even started the project like when the first day the MetaHuman came out for Epic, and it was just like so ambitious. I mean, really, really ambitious. Still is ambitious, and we like at one point we're like maybe we shouldn't wait. We were so caught up on the deadline. We were just like maybe let's just like work through the problems and try a green screen. And our old office, we've now moved. We had a much smaller office, and the former tenant had a gym in the basement. So the like rubber speckled floor, and the locker is a full wall of mirror. It's very weird. And we're in there, and like one day, I think like I don't remember if I walked down, but the lights are kind of dim, and I'm like, they're doing something down there. Let me go check. And there's a green screen, and there's a bunch of Legos everywhere of Pooh Bear and Tigger and Eeyore, and they're trying out this like green screen, and it was like it couldn't get the composure to really work properly, but like that was kind of the moment where like we were having so much fun, and we still have fun, but that was really like one of the best like,
Yeah.
trying techniques to get this to work.
The ambitious thing, though, is so real. This is literally the first project we were going to do. Jeremy was just talking. When I had heard about this, I said, boy, this is ambitious. And he goes, yep. And we did it. And at the time, the stage wasn't necessarily even a thing for us. We were going to be borrowing a stage. We were going to use another stage. It didn't work out that way. The green screen certainly didn't work out. We tried our best, but that did not look great. There is a way to do it. We did not succeed at it. But yeah, that is all about that problem solving, troubleshooting, trying to find a way out of that corner that we kind of painted ourselves into. And that you're a great team to do it with, though, because you guys are all like-minded in that way, where we all want to problem solve together. It's awesome.
Cool. Thanks. Questions for them about the process right up here, Peter?
Great, thanks very much. It's fascinating stuff. I'm curious, how do you decide or select which projects you choose to work on? What makes it an appropriate project for this particular platform, the LED wall, and so forth?
So we at the center we have a standard process of how we get projects. So it goes through the partnership, and then before it gets to we, but most importantly, we focus on projects that has the ability, for example, if it has to do with spatial environments, if it has to do with interactive elements. And so we could easily spot earlier on that okay, this course could be a good fit for virtual production, and then they make the decision and pass it over to us.
Thank you.
Sorry, just a real quick follow up to that. The other piece is, does it help our workflow? You know, we can shoot a lot on green screen, but green screen, it's not hard. It just requires a little bit more legwork. You know, you got to bring in your magenta lights. You might have to change a bulb on your keynotes in the old space, not necessarily the new ones or whatever. It becomes a bit more challenging. But when you get to the stage, you know, you kind of get the ambient light from the stage. You're able to kind of set it and pull them into the scene a little bit more. And I think it's just a nice tool because you can just throw an image up and tailor it to what you need, and that's pretty cool.
Thank you so much. As a journalist, I think this is delicious. My question is a kind of a follow up to the first question. When one is a faculty is pitching for an idea, does it need to be fleshed out in terms of storyboarding, in terms of the interactivity, or is just an idea and then you kind of ideate like how can you approach this?
Yeah, so that's usually one of the biggest process in our workflow, because most times we have faculty members who come in with this beautiful idea, and then you know they don't really have the full picture yet. You know, they're just like, oh, we want to do this, and all of that. So I try as much as possible to create enough time to help them develop the idea to the extent that we know the beginning and the ending, so that way you know when we go into development stage we don't have to reduce issues with communications and burnout and all of that, because we don't want to be changing elements in the script while Ray and Moise are doing their development work. So we usually have a it could be a week or a month or three where we focus on developing the video structure, the idea, and also developing the script. And once the script is ready, we begin developing the storyboard, because we always start with a storyboard. For virtual production, you want to know how you frame your shots. So during the storyboard stage is where we decide, okay, this is how the angle will be framed. So I work closely with Jeff and the rest of the team to ensure that okay, this shot angle we are going for is something that will work on our stage, because every stage is different. So there are some short angles that wouldn't work on our stage. So we use that period to figure all of that and then design a storyboard. And then once the storyboard is developed, then I pass that to Ray, who starts working on the digital assets. And then Moise also used the storyboard to apply any animations and interactions. And then Jeff also used the storyboard during productions. But
Yeah, and I think that off of that, so like the handoff from sort of like Chimela to me, I would say for all of us, we all kind of understand each other's roles, but there's like enough trust and respect that we could trust fall and be very fine with each other. But I think that like Chimela's always thinking for me in that process. So like when he's meeting and thinking of the scripts, like maybe in context with like some of the shots, he's like, oh, we could do an establishing shot with like some B-roll or throw that up with an AI image and then dedicate all of our energy to this custom environment. Because like as Jamal was talking about, script changes that could also then exponentially increase like the levels that have to be done. And I would say the Black Reform Social Protest Project was one where it had to be so tight because I mean 12 people in a small room. We were doing like 9 or 12 or 13-hour days. I don't even know how long some of those days were. And but there was also like 4 costume changes, hair and makeup, like so you have no time. So like you have to like minimize the amount of environments and understand how to like set everything up so optimized, at least just for even like human labor within the studio.
To tie those two things together, it's really important. We tried designing and creating the storyboard before Chimela was hired, and then he saw our storyboard, and I was on leave. I had a kid last year, and came back, and it was all we have to change the whole entire thing, and that's how valuable someone like Jamila in the studio is. He's able to see what the technical limitations of the stage are. Here, we're trying to be creatives, which you are creative. I'm not saying you're very much. Trying to be creatives, and we have this vision we're trying to execute on. We want to do all these pushes, pulls, lifts, whatever. We want to get some, in my head, I'm like, oh, we can use the extended reality extension to get these bird's eye view shots potentially in studio. And he comes along, he's like, "You're not doing any of those," but now we do it in the render instead. So it's good to have that perspective early, so you're not wasting your time.
Yeah, it's also like that's Shmela's citing limitation, where sometimes like we developed the first field scene, and we were like, "This is amazing! This looks so good," and then the frame rate was like 4 frames per second, and so we had to scrap it and redo everything.
And you were able to put together the field pretty quickly. You know, that was also impressive.
I think coming from architecture or maybe like VR stuff, you want to make full environments, right? You want people to explore and kind of like Disney. You want it thematic to where every detail counts and people can like be a voyeur and explore. And realistically, it's very much more so film and set design. You just gotta like fake the two walls, nothing behind it. It's held up by double stick tape and some toothpicks.
The way you design your sets allows someone who's trying to find a shot in the moment to explore the space. Like some of the shots that we have in that are not things that we had in the storyboard. We're just like, hey, this works. This looks great because you built out such a great environment at the same time. So like, yeah, and it was optimized amazingly. Wasn't running at 4 frames a second, but yeah.
We could take another question.
Just a very quick comment. You may have mentioned this or not. Can you or do you add historically accurate weather, for example, rain or wind, so you don't have to wait for an actual day to?
Good.
It can. Yeah. So that's one of the huge advantages that it offers. You can have infinite daytime. You know, or is that the golden hour? Yeah, you can have infinite golden hour. You don't have to really wait for that time of the day. Yeah, we can do storms, rains, and all of that.
There's some pretty good plugin for Unreal where you can even type in like the day and the time and your geographic locations, and it gets you like the proper azimuth and all the like kind of like lighting conditions. There's different ways of you want optimized effects. So there's ways where like we're doing a shot right now where we want clouds. The aerial view is actually pulled using like the Google tiles, like an API to like extract it. It's legal now, and so there's a company that has enabled that. So it's a great company, and so but like we could do clouds, but realistically for the depth of field, we're gonna have Jeff add in post, and so really it's like understanding how to.
About the weather was interesting. We were doing a test shoot, and we had some people come through the studio, and they were watching, and they're like, "Why are you shooting this field shot here? Like, why don't you go out to a field and just shoot it?" I'm like, "Well, it's February, and there's no grass or field, and it's cold, and the sun isn't out, so."
There's a lot of danger that power to being able to have control of everything in the scene, because you can really get down to the detail. Like, you're so used to having limitations anytime you shoot, and when you feel like you have power over the sun, like we did a short a while ago. It's not related to CAI, but it was we shot in Liberty Park, and you have to track the sun throughout the day so you can get the same exposure on everyone. We can have an HMI where we're going to combat with which is a very powerful light for anyone that doesn't know. An HMI light is usually used to mimic the sun. They'll throw it through a window, right? We didn't have that. We were going very DIY, and we were picking our shots based on where the sun was in the sky. For the stage, I don't have to do that. I just say keep the sun right there the whole entire time. Now, as far as getting historical accurate weather, I think we're being particular, but at the same time, as a cinematographer, shooting something that's overcast is a lot. It's better for what I need. There's less considerations about shadows and angles of the shadow and trying to match everything to the background. If you're trying to do that on the stage, it's going to take a while. So we did take some liberties probably with some of the overcast and all that, but for the most part, really try to keep it pretty accurate.
Other questions for the team? Yes.
Hi, thanks. This has been great. I run a similar lab at my university, and I am inspired, impressed, and envious because we're a little more primitive. But my question was, what about music in your production? Where does it come from? How do you use it?
So this in particular was actually done with opera students. So they actually originally back in 2022, we recorded at the Duderstadt a full production. We had them all in there, and that for that, it's literally just singing throughout the whole piece. So you have in the field they're singing to each other. You have throughout all the protests there's a form of singing, of music, as a form of protest. So that's what that's about. So for the music and all that, and then for Foley, we're just trying to pull as much as we can to kind of help tie the scene together. We don't have someone dedicated to do Foley or someone dedicated to do sound design. So we're just kind of trying to make it work as best as we can. I think we did all right. But yeah, did that answer your question? Yeah.
And I think you guys also have subscriptions on paid.
Yeah, we have Story Blocks, which is just a nice like repository that we can jump into and grab what we need. So, we have in the past. We've had people on our team that are musicians themselves. We just did a piece with CRLT, and they had a composer do music for some pieces, and it does affect because it becomes its own original piece inside of this, and feels more bespoke, I guess.
Great work. But how big is your production team, and how does that compare to like a traditional production? Is it how many more coders or anything do you have?
Yeah, so our media design department, we actually pride ourselves on hiring Jack and Jills of all trade. Like we want people who can wear multiple hats. I come from film, and it's very much isolated based on the roles, right? You have your AD who's just in charge of logistics, nothing else. You have your cinematographer making the image, but he has this gaffer who's helping design it. Like you have people with their roles. When we do it here, we have a lot of people on our team, but they also have a lot of other responsibilities. So it'd be great to say, hey, let's take I think we have 15 folks on our team right now. I can't remember doing a lot of hiring. But I can't say, hey, they're all going to fill out a role and come work on this one project. They have way too much going on. I can't burden them with that. But we do have a small crew that came in, people that we all trust to put things up. So I think on the day we had 3 people acting as like gaffer. We had 1 gaffer and 2 grips, and that was it for the day. We did hire hair and makeup out though. I know we did that, but
We do 30 to 40 online courses a year. They're not all using this stage, so we're trying to figure out where a course may have 10, 20 videos. Not all of them. Well, one class we did that, but not all of them would be shot on that studio. So which ones make sense to take that part of the course and put this high production in?
And to demystify one thing, we went on probably about a year discovery of understanding, maybe even like prior to the stage being built, of like how do we do this thing? So like in film, I've learned of recent tensions and understanding the union tension with these things called virtual art departments. And so like traditionally in virtual production, there's a virtual art department. And when we were doing all this sort of like researching and meeting with people or consultants, a lot of people are really still stuck within like the feature film virtual production. And realistically speaking, a lot of the virtual production is actually just commercials and small shoots. And so a lot of the information that exists is kind of not really helpful to smaller teams understanding logistically what is needed. And so I think like to demystify something for like a lot of people in the room, so like in higher education, if you're interested in this, or just like anyone with a smaller shoot, you can like I've been to a couple of the stages and talked with the teams, and they're like, yeah, you can do this with like 2 or 3 people, and like they might do small teams and like kit bash some of the stuff, but realistically you don't need like we have a really amazing team of like really talented media designers. So we're one of the lucky few, to be honest. I think that we're really fortunate to have just like an arsenal of creatives. But like realistically speaking, you can have a small team and do this, and you don't need to fill every traditional film role. That's like something that I would like highly recommend. And if you're looking to do virtual production stuff, talk to smaller commercial studios, not the feature film people, because they'll tell you a totally different thing outside of your budget. And
You could do this with an iPhone, a green screen, and like a Vive controller. It's a lot more challenging, but you can, and then you can get started. That's the Lego. We were doing that with that Lego setup in the basement of our old building.
well now you could also just if you have a big enough TV, you can stand in front of that. So a lot of options.
Go to Costco. Okay. Any last questions?
not sponsored.
They did not sponsor this year. All right. Well, thank you so much. Really appreciate all the work you've done, sharing that.